Didn't hear heartbreaking, never heard a word. We lack communication.
Hello, my name's Nigel. I am the singer and songwriter of the Plymouth UK-based indie funk band The Curve, and this is my podcast, Songs Nobody Asked Me For. I haven't done the whole spiel for a little while. I kind of figured it might be good to just remind everybody who I am, what I do, really. I don't know why. Just seemed a thing to do today, really. Um, I wanted to talk a bit about, in preparation of, I know I'm meeting a guy called Rob next week, Rob C, on the next podcast. And I know Rob's been around in the Plymouth scene for many, many years. And just wanted to sort of acknowledge that a bit really ahead of seeing him, looking forward to meeting him. And to talk a little bit about maybe what's called the Plymouth Musicians Co-operative, my experience of them in Plymouth, but also a little bit about mental health, working in mental health, and being involved in music in mental health for a period of time, really. So that's what I plan to do. I don't know where it will go, whether it will work. I'm going to try and get that narrative together and see what happens. I'm thinking back to when I first went to Plymouth. So I arrived in Plymouth. Well, I did a degree at the College of St Mark and St John's when I was 18. That was in the early 80s. Then stayed in Plymouth for a couple of years, moved back to, briefly to Essex. Well, actually, I moved to London. Yeah, that's right. Back in Essex for a short time. Then I was back in London, and then lived in London for quite a few years in the East End before coming back down to Plymouth. So I came to Plymouth in, I think about 1993, 1994. Quite a while ago now. And yeah, enjoyed it. It was kind of an interesting trip and then change, and things were very different. But the thing I lost was my musical connections. Really, I was in the band in London with Pav. I loved doing that. And as I've talked about in a previous podcast, I never really managed to find anybody down here. But the group of people that were probably most helpful in some of that was the Musicians Co-operative. I came across them, and they were down in a place called Cat Down, which is kind of yeah, part of Plymouth, in the city centre there. And when I first met them, yeah, I was a little bit lost really. And I think, yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to think about how to describe it. Really, it was kind of. They were like some musos just trying to sort of hang out and just be helpful to people, really, I think. And I mean that in a complimentary way, where they were just very sort of chilled, laid back people, just saying, oh, yeah, we can help you, we can do this. And they used to put on quite a lot of gigs for independent bands. And then I wasn't in an independent band at that time, so I was just looking for musicians. And I wasn't very successful with that. I also chatted to them for quite a while about trying to get get into writing music for film, and that's a whole nother podcast of something that didn't work very well. But they were kind of a little helpful, put me in touch with some contacts and people. That was really helpful. I was quite keen on getting my music published at the time as well, and they were looking into, somebody there was looking into help me with that, but again, that didn't really happen. So I didn't really have masses of success with that. Got to know a guy called Doc there, who's fantastic, and maybe I might try and get him on here at some point. He's a sound engineer, and we still use him for recording now because I really like to support the project. And even though maybe it'd be interesting sometimes to try somewhere different, but I've known Doc for years and like supporting them, and he does a good job, and really happy with the recordings that we have of our stuff, really. So that was a little history. I don't really know when I first did any recording there, really. But certainly since we've been in the band, and I remember another period before that I'm going to talk about, really. So, Musicians Co-operative. Rob was part of that, initially setting up. Guy I knew, people had a lot of nicknames, so Doc is not called Doc, obviously, that's his nickname. And a guy I knew was Fudge, who I've only recently discovered passed away quite recently, which was a little sad. He was a really nice guy, and I used to meet up with him and jam a little bit as well because he used to play bass. We used to sort of get together and work on songs, this and that and the other. And yeah, yeah, he was a nice guy. He was a nice guy. I They had an agency for a while. Talked a little bit about me playing in that agency and doing some gigs I absolutely hated, but it was great that they were doing it. They were promoting artists and original music. Even though, as I say, they were hard gigs, and didn't really enjoy the gigs that I experienced through that really. Um, so that was where I found myself with the Musicians Cooperative, and I had contact with them, and then I didn't. Now, alongside of all of this music, I work in mental health, and I've worked in mental health for a very long time. I'm a family and systemic psychotherapist. I'm really happy and proud of being that. Prior to that, I was an occupational therapist, and I trained up in London, and but worked in London maybe for a year. I worked in Paddington, mainly in Paddington area, and then we moved from London to Plymouth, and worked in various places in Plymouth. And I was one of the first OTs to work in the community mental health in Plymouth. In London, I'd worked in a very multidisciplinary team, but in Plymouth, it was mainly nursing staff, and I was a OT coming into the community team. And part of what my job to do within that was to sort of think about running groups, really. Groups for clients, and traditionally, sort of occupational groups would have been, I would have set something up, the clients would do it, whatever it might be. I don't know, people do cooking groups and all these sorts of things, and I would just be facilitating these. But I didn't really want to do that. And we had two areas in Plymouth. The city was split into two. And myself and my colleague who was in the other area, a lovely one called Julia, we didn't want to do groups in that way. We wanted to do something different. And we looked around, and I found this thing in London. I wish I could remember where it was. But it was called it was called the Community Group Network. And we went up to visit them and to go and look at what they were doing. And it was really exciting. I remember what was most exciting for me was we went to visit them at a recording studio. And this recording studio was run mainly by clients of the mental health service, or people with mental health issues and difficulties. And the idea of the model that they ran was that they would have activity-based groups, and whatever activity it was that they did, they would invite an expert or somebody in that field to come and run the group with them. And whatever therapist or professional was involved, they joined the group and did it. Okay, so if you ran an art group, they might try and find a local artist, and as well as the clients doing the art, the therapist would join in and do the art as well. So that it was trying to bring some equity between people running the group and people coming to the group. To get a sense of more of a balance, really, rather than this idea that you sat to the side or you watched or whatever. And also, what we tried to bring, we brought this back and we set this up in Plymouth. And what we also tried to add to this was a sort of social element. So, I ran a men's gym group for a couple of years. It was great because I got to work out. I buddied up with the clients we had, and we'd do it together, and that was really encouraging. But always afterwards, there was we'd meet at the end for a cup of coffee, so that we were all sat down chatting, catching up. And great. There was so many rich conversations that happened in that, and a sense of us, sort of being in it together, really. Now, obviously, it's not surprising to say that, this is a podcast about music. And I set up a music group. I was really keen to. And there's a great guy called Jonathan who's a volunteer at Mind in Plymouth. I think he still does. He's been there for a very long time. And he'd been there a while when I was in Plymouth working. And he's also a musician. He's involved in one of the festivals in Plymouth here called Freedom Festival, which is in Freedom Fields Park. But also, he's been involved in Mind for ages, and he ran music groups in Mind and that. So I approached him to see whether he'd be interested in setting this up with me and doing it, which he was. And it was a really fantastic experience, really. And essentially, we were looking for clients that had musical ability, and what I tried to do and succeeded in doing for a while was setting it up as a band. And it was great. It was great. We had the clients that worked with us had what we would call in my profession severe and enduring mental health problems. So we had people who were dealing with psychosis or severe depression or had personality issues, whatever we would call that these days. Um, Maybe manic depressive issues. Um, Recovering from drug and alcohol issues, which should have mental health issues related to them. So all sorts of these, really difficult and complex conditions. And we had this period of time where we ran a functioning band. It was great. Now, it comes full circle to the Musicians Cooperative because they gave us free practice studio space, which was amazing. So we used to go there and practice. And we also were successful in bidding for some money, something like the lottery, but it wasn't the lottery, it was something similar to that. So we bought a load of equipment. We had to buy these amps, we bought guitars, we bought percussion instruments, which was fabulous. We bought keyboard as well. So all this stuff, and again, the PMC let us store all that stuff with them for free. It's fantastic. And we did a couple of EPs. I searched one out, although I can't obviously share people's names, and I'm not going to do that. But you can see you're not going to see much because it's a sort of obscure thing. But the band was called Minds Like These. That's what the guys wanted to be called. And yeah, we had a guy playing guitar, guy who sang, and both of them wrote songs. But we'll come on to that as well because that was a really enjoyable part of my time in that group. I remember a young woman who played some percussion and sung. We had a bass player, was also within the mental health services, a keyboard player. Jonathan just played some rhythm guitar and sort of helped out really. We had another volunteer come from and play drums because we couldn't find a drummer within the mental health services. It was fantastic. Now, for me, what I loved about it is what we did was original material. We didn't do any covers at all. And the guy who could just sing couldn't play an instrument, but he wrote songs but couldn't play. So he had an idea in his head of how we'd like the songs to be. So this allowed me to sort of be in this wonderful creative space of writing music for him. So we would get together and he would kind of say, he'd sing me some of his lyrics and he'd say, oh, this is what I want, this is how I want it to be, like this, and he'd sing some sort of tune. I'd kind of just play something and just say a bit like this, and then maybe I'd add a bit, or I'd adapt it in a little way, and I'd say, what about this? So it was a real collaboration with somebody who couldn't play, but had quite strong opinions about how he'd like things to be. I really found it invigorating at a time. This was during the time that I've described in other podcasts when I was really struggling to find any musicians to play with. But I was playing with the guys, it was great. The other singer, or the other songwriter played guitar. He was at the front of that picture on the album and sadly passed away towards the end of the time we were doing that, really. He wrote his own songs and played them, and we played those songs. And what I did with his songs was I kind of sorted out the arrangement of that. So sometimes I'd add guitars behind it, and I like working with harmonic chords. So he'd be playing major chords, and I'd be adding these sort of slightly minor harmonic chords behind it, just to sort of add some depth to it. Jonathan and I did some backing vocals, and it worked really well. And I have to say that CD that I showed you, all done at the PMC. The PMC, Doc did all the recording for us. They didn't charge anything to us, which was so good, And for the clients, it was amazing because none of them had ever been in a band. They got used to being in a band, and then for any of you that aren't musicians, it's quite exciting the first time you ever get a CD of you playing something. Or for me back in the day, it was cassette tapes, but you sort of suddenly have this stuff that you can play that's really good quality, and I think that, well, I know they all really enjoyed the experience. And then of course what we inevitably then do is we think, well, it'd be good to play some gigs. So we managed to do some gigs. So we were a gigging band for probably about a year towards the end of that. We did a couple of pubs. I remember playing in a pub called the Cherry Tree in near Peveril in Plymouth. Um, it's a great gig. They played really well. We were quite a tight band, you know. We took a lot of it was a lot of work because we were playing with a group of people who'd not been in bands and didn't know what that was like, and we kind of worked on it and worked on it. But yeah, we played there. We played a couple of sort of mental health day type of things. You know, there was sort of, you know, there's Mental Health Awareness Week, and there would be a sort of fair there, and we would be one of, they had various music things happening. We'd be one of the bands or things that was on, you know. I remember one particularly one year when I did a sort of solo set earlier on, and then the band came on and played later. But it was such a great experience, and you know that community group network I think still runs. People who run it now or run those groups don't really understand the ethos of what we had, probably. But we were running loads of groups for clients throughout the community at that time, all with this ethos of, you know, that we were part of that. And but the music group for me was fantastic, and another opportunity for me to be creative, and really enjoyed the guys, you know, coming out of themselves and really, yeah, just having this opportunity to be in this thing. I also have warm memories of going off to do photo shoots for the CDs to sort of do the covers and that. I mean, that picture that we have there on that cover is of us. It was in a local newspaper. Actually, it's in the Plymouth Herald. There was an article all about the PMC, and I think that picture came from that photo shoot actually. Um, yeah, and there's one on the back. Again, I can't show you because I haven't got anybody's permission to show pictures. And I remember going to like a sort of town that's just outside of Plymouth near the coast and taking photos, doing a photo shoot. I remember one of us, there were a load of like canoes, they were all up in a line and we were all standing in front of each of these canoes. It's a pretty arty picture. I was quite impressed with it at the time, really. So we did two of these CDs. I've got this one here. Can't remember. I think the other one. I don't know. Maybe I have it at work somewhere. Maybe I have it at work. I'm going to put one of the tracks on here, and I'm going to put one of the wonderful, lovely late Rob's tracks on there as an intro and outro to this because, yeah, it's very poignant, and yeah, I thought it was pretty good, you know, and yeah, good experience of mine. And although it was only for a short period, well, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 years. But it was during that period that I've described when I couldn't find musicians to play with, and I felt, I don't know why. Maybe it's because Rob's coming on, and I know Rob was integral in starting up the musicians cooperative and making sure it ran, and I felt that it was important to sort of celebrate that in some way, or to mention it or notice that. And of course, you know, I know what music does for my mental health, and I'm always happier and always in a better place when I'm able to do music, and of course that was true for my client group as well, and still is. And I still, you know, come across. I'm working with a couple at the moment, and I know the guy is a musician, and it's quite funny. There's been a period of time when I've had to work at home, and due to a relative being unwell, and so I've met them online. I don't do that very often because with my work, it's quite complex, and I mean it's better to see people face to face. But when they came on, I knew the couple. I'd worked with them quite a bit on face to face, and then I saw them online, and the front room they were in, there was a massive row of guitars behind him, and I said, "Oh wow!" And I kind of picked my laptop up and showed him my row of guitars that was behind me, and I said, "Look, snap!" You know, it's kind of, and it was a connection. You know, it's a connection, and it was really important to him. And I remember working with another guy years ago who had a recording studio up in his bedroom. It was really, really good quality recording studio, and was making music, and he was getting very frustrated with wanting things to be just right, and struggled with that. But you know, he was great, and that was a really important part of his life. And we could use that within the work because I could take a slightly, what I'd call a one down position. So you know, whereas I was there as some expert or somebody working with mental health, and we'd be thinking about that, supporting him, being able to say, "I've been trying to do some recording at home. Is it? How do you do this? Or what do you? You know?" It just allowed him to be in a position of expertise, and I know it was a really important aspect of his life. You know, so yeah, it's interesting. You know, just needs to be mentioned really, and as I say, PMC, wonderful people. I think the equipment that we got is still used for Mind music groups, so or some of it. Not sure it all works these days, but that does, that is used. Amps and some congas. I think we bought some significant bits of equipment. It was very exciting going out and buying the equipment. That's why I remember that. Thinking, oh, I've got this money to go and spend on the band. Yeah, it was a good experience and good to celebrate. And yeah, I don't know if I've got a lot more to say about it. I kind of, I'd almost forgotten it. And I was thinking the other day about it when I made contact with Rob, and I thought I just wanted to talk about it for a while, really. It kept me being creative in different ways. I think when I worked on my own for that period of time as a singer-songwriter, it wasn't enough for me creatively, and I think this was one of the things I was able to find that helped my mental health at that time, really, you know. And so, it was an important thing. I also used to meet with a guy. He was the boyfriend of a friend of my wife's, I think, and I really liked him. They didn't stay together, but and he was a songwriter, and he used to write really funny songs. I like them, and I used to go over to his place, and I used to jam with him around his songs, and we used to play his songs, and I did it on the bass. It's the only time I've ever played the bass. I'm not very good at jamming. I'm hoping to do one of these with my band at some point, just to get them all together and just to have a chat about what we do and see what comes up that's maybe different from the one-to-one interviews I've done. But I'm not very good at jamming. People love jamming, and I love to listen to jamming, and the guys are really good, and I'm rubbish. I don't know what to do with the guitar, and I don't know what to do with my voice, and so very often I feel like Dad, really. They sort of jam between the songs we're practicing, and then I have to pull them back together again. I say, right, come on then, let's get on with this. And I was speaking to John about it the other day and saying, well, partly it's because it's really important that we focus on what we're doing. If it's a band, you need to focus in a practice. But it's partly because I'm not very good at jamming. I really love hearing you guys jam. And sort of suggesting that maybe what I might do is sort of suggest that when we first set up, there's 10-15 minutes at the beginning where we just jam, just to try and make myself get better at it. But when I was meeting with this guy, his name was Simon, I found that it was easier to jam on the bass than it was on the guitar, so that's what I did. And seemed to do it okay, really. I wasn't brilliant, but I got quite good on the bass for a while. One of my sons has a bass here, and I also had a bass that I bought from Pav, who played the bass in our band, his old bass, which now I've given to John, and actually John's playing in the band, so it kind of feels quite nice, really, that's still being used. It's a very 1980s bass. Can't even remember the make of it now, but it's got a wood finish, and it's yeah. He quite enjoys playing it. He hated the look of it when I said to him, "Oh, do you want this?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I love that," but he said, "Oh, it's a really ugly guitar, isn't it?" And I thought, well, no, I quite like it, but it's got quite a bright sound. I think he's quite enjoyed using it. But yeah, used that for a while, played bass. Don't anymore, really. Maybe it's because I've just come across such better bass players than I am. No, I couldn't really imagine doing that, really. But yeah, good for a while. Creative spaces at a time when I couldn't be creative. All original stuff. Hey, keeping music alive. Right, I need to go. Please, do subscribe to this. Wherever you're watching it, or like it, or follow it. This is Songs Nobody Asked Me For. Like the band, go and look at us, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, #Music The Curve. If you search that, you'll find us around. And yeah, next time I've got Rob coming to talk to us and meet with me, and really looking forward to that. And after that, onwards and upwards, I guess. Okay, I'll see you soon.
Never heard a word.